following video contains disturbing content. Viewer discretion is advised. I remember one time back in high school, I was going over to music practice. I went to a residential school, so I was heading from my dorm with a couple friends over to the music wing. On our way, we heard somebody walking in the woods right near the pathway that we were on. We also saw like a flashlight, and needless to say, we were a little bit creeped out. We called out to whoever it might have been, but we got no answer, just more walking and more flashlight. And then one of my friends had the balls to go check it out. But when she got there was nothing. We were really creeped out at this point, so we ran the rest of the way to the music wing. As soon as we got inside, my music teacher came up to us asking what was going on. We reported the situation to him, thinking that it was just somebody creeping onto the school since it was public property. His response kind of weirded me out, if I'm honest. He told us about a former security guard who used to patrol the school, especially the woods at night, to make sure, to keep things safe. He mentioned one day the particular security guard in question disappeared. No one ever found him. No one ever heard from him. There was no evidence as to where the guy went. He was just gone one day, never came back. We were told that since that day, sometimes people would randomly see somebody walking in the woods with a flashlight. But you'd call out to him, you'd get nothing. You'd go investigate, he'd be gone.
I call this one the Talking Dead. Now, I'm only going by what my mom used to tell me back when I was a little kid. I was abnormal was not even the proper term. Like I would do some crazy stuff. Like I was one of those kids that always played by themselves up until I reached like mid-elementary school. This is when I started having like actual friends and stuff. But as like a toddler, like I did a lot on my own, and weird stuff would always come out of it. Like this one time, supposedly according to my mom, back in the Philippines, one time we had a relative pass away, and unfortunately, because we weren't very wealthy back then, we didn't have money to put the individual in a morgue, let alone have burial arrangements set up early enough. But basically what we ended up having to do was we needed to keep this individual's body in the house, but in the coldest part. So I believe we ended up keeping her somewhere in the cellar. But when I was a little boy, apparently, I don't remember doing this, but my mom told me, maybe I was around 2 years old, 2 or 3, that for the sake of this video, we'll call her Jackie, because I didn't actually know the relative's name. But when Jackie died, apparently, according to my mom, I would approach the corpse and talk to her like she was still alive, and respond to her as if she was still there. I don't recall that moment, but apparently, according to my mom, I had a ball that I would throw, and it would bounce off the wall, and I would say that Jackie was the one throwing it back, or something crazy. And I remember very vaguely that I would have like an imaginary friend as a kid. Maybe it was her. Who knows? But either way, if you see your kid talking to someone and they're not there, beware. Because my parents definitely were. I still get the chills every time I talk about it, actually. Ugh. I call this one The Hunter. And it was a story passed down to me by my dad. He used to sit around the dinner table with us and just basically run this one through our heads. And he's like, his last sentence through the story would always be, "So you still want to go?" And I'll get to that in a minute. But the fact of the matter is, when we were younger, my brother, the one second, that's the second youngest, there's four of us, I'm the youngest. So the second youngest, he got into this phase where he liked his guns, and my dad didn't like it, but, you know, my dad always said, it's better to know what they're doing and then watch them versus them do it behind your back. Later on, they get in trouble. So he watched them. He let him have his BB guns and such. But my dad knew that he wanted to go hunting, and my dad went hunting for deer with his buddies. And basically, the story goes, one time my brother actually went with them. So it was my dad, my brother, and three other guys. I forgot where they went, but they were deep in the woods one night. And actually, I apologize, that wasn't a night. It was actually broad daylight when they went. And story goes from their end that somebody in that area would hunt for people. And he was one of those hillbilly type kind of guys, messed up in the head. But they didn't believe in that, and their philosophy was, oh, there's like 5 of us, so we'll be fine. Well, they were wandering around doing the hunt one day, and one of the guys takes off to go pee, and they were a good bit away from him fishing, taking a break from the actual hunt, and supposedly they hear a gunshot come out of nowhere. They go looking for the guy that went to go pee. He was nowhere in sight. And there were drag marks headed somewhere. And then later on, because they split off to see if they could find him, they fanned out throughout the woods. And then one of the guys reported seeing car tires or tire marks. So whoever it was must have taken the dude that went to go pee after shooting him. Dark stuff. And that's why my dad, every time, would ask my brother, "You still want to go?" when he'd go hunting in later days after that event. And my brother's answer would always be, "No. Hell no." I can't say I blame him. Can't say I blame him at all. So this happened when I was, I think maybe grade 4, grade 5, I think. Somewhere around that time. It's kind of a blur since I'm like 28 now. 29, actually, going to be. No, I'm like 30. Jeez, I'm surprised my memory still works. But anywho, this happened back when I was 9 or 10. And it didn't happen to me per se, but it actually happened to my brother and his friends. And I knew he wasn't lying, because his reaction when he came back was he was just flustered, and my dad was one of those man's man kind of guys, and he basically beat him if he knew he was lying. So he continued with this story, and dad actually had to go check it out. But leading up to that point, basically, one day, it was a summer day, they were all just running around in the apartment because he's 5 years older than me, so he would have been a teenager at that point, and you know, teenagers do. But he was basically, they like to hang out at the 11th floor because that's where we were, the stairwell at the 11th floor. So we had like one of the first apartments after you come in. But basically, they would chill there, and they were dropping off one of their buddies at the 7th floor, so they would just all kind of climb down together. And on their way down, they actually ended up seeing one of their other buddies' moms just kind of hunched over at the railing there. I forgot what floor it would have been. You mentioned it. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But so one of the guys walks over to see if she's okay, because she wasn't responding to their calls or anything, and just so happens she had a heart attack there and just passed out and died. So my brother ended up finding a corpse at our old building. That's not unsettling at all, but I wish I could say that was the end of that story, but it wasn't. Because every so often, they would still chill after that fact at the 11th floor stairwell, and every now and then they claim to hear that somebody was on their way back up, and the minute it reached the stairwell below them, so it would have been the 10th floor stairwell, all of a sudden the steps would stop, you wouldn't hear a door, someone would go check it out, and nobody would be there. Happened quite often, actually, after that, he says. But anyway, hopefully I don't end up running into anything like that in my apartment or any time in the future. Ugh. So I have an interesting family. I won't name names or point fingers. God forbid. You'll find out why I refuse to do that, just not even out of respect, in the end of this story. I wouldn't want anything messed up happening to me, needless to say. But anyways, this happened to an individual within my family. They played the role of the lone wolf, needless to say. I feel like we all, in my immediate family anyway, had done this over time at some point. So, it's not surprising to mention when someone in this family has done it, or is in that boat. In any case, this individual and their significant other moved into a new condominium in our city, and they were just getting their lives started at that point, and they had just moved out of a really, really crummy basement apartment, so they were thrilled to find this place. I've been there once. There was something a bit off about it, but then again, sometimes I have a bad habit of just thinking too much about certain things, and that's probably what caused it. But after I heard this story, I had to second guess even myself and my own instinct to doubt that. But things were going fine for them, swimmingly, after they moved in. They were having fun, throwing parties. I've been to one of those parties. They'd have their friends over. Then they got into some weird stuff. And this individual's significant other, they like to mess with the other side, is what I'll say. They like to believe they could contact certain individuals that have passed on from this world, is how I'll put it. You can use your imagination on what else this individual might be into, but I won't get into that. It might not be suitable for this. But yeah. So they got into this, and my family member, being the scaredy cat that they were, probably still are. Thank God I'm not pointing fingers, huh? But they were not into it. But their significant other pushed on and kept experimenting with these unknown factors. So one day, they wake up and they notice something's off. Apparently, my family member, as they told the story, they noticed the windows just be opened the next day, despite them making absolute sure the night before that they actually closed them. The supposed things go bump in the night premise applied, and next thing you know, they were hearing things that weren't there, and voices, some of which they recognized speaking in our language, and which would have apparently have been impossible because those individuals they thought they heard lived nowhere near them at the time. So weird stuff would be happening, and as the days went by, they fought more and more, and just the negative vibe increased, and finally it happened. One morning, they came back home from a fishing trip, and their place was a disaster. And I don't mean like things were just flipped here and there, I mean a disaster. This family member still cries when they talk about it because they literally had to get rid of everything they owned. Not to mention, them and their significant other almost split up over the event. But continuing on what they came home to. Not only were the windows opened, despite them again making sure that they were closed before they left, but this time there were apparently bodies upon bodies of insects just laying everywhere, even eggs hanging out of some of them despite being dead. Some dissected apparently, and some still fine flying around eating the remains of the ones that were gone. Their food apparently was just taken out of the fridge, placed on the counters and all over the floor. Insects piled all up on the food, just taking it. They even saw an army of ants just crawling and taking things and bringing them out. Here's the weird part about that. They were on the 7th floor. How the hell did those ants get up there? You might have an answer, but as for me, that's really weird. So needless to say, after that day, they made every single possible effort to get the hell out of there, and honestly, I don't blame them one bit. I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't even know why I'm telling you this story, because really, it's just mumbo jumbo to me until it happens to me, but I'm also the type to believe anything is possible. Despite there being an explanation for everything, good luck looking for it when it comes to some stuff. Because for this, I couldn't even tell you what the hell happened. Or I couldn't even begin to describe to you what may have caused all those unfortunate events. But what I can tell you, don't mess with what you don't know. Because even if you think you know what you're doing, you might just never know what else is playing with you when you're playing around with the unknown.
I heard this story in passing from a couple friends. They were outside at this apartment building, and there was this woman tending to her garden on her balcony. I think she was near the top of the building or something, and at one point she ended up falling off. My friends went to investigate and found her on the floor. She was alive at the time, but after a while, she passed away due to her injuries. I don't approach the railing on my balcony anymore.
I call this one Something's Wrong. I had a very interesting childhood, needless to say. From my story so far, you can kind of put it together, right? I was one of those kids that saw more things than he could comprehend at the time. And even if somebody were to try to put it together for me, I'm pretty sure at that age, I probably wouldn't have understood a thing they said. But either way, despite ignorance being bliss, sometimes the simple ignorance factor combined with what you see in front of you, what's put in front of you, It can mess with your head a lot more than you would ever imagine possible. But anyways, there was one night when I was about 9, and I woke up and everything was quiet. There was the minute I got up, I can't really explain it, but there was something wrong. Like there was just that odd feeling the minute you get up and you know just something shouldn't be. It's within the atmosphere. I know some of you are either thinking I'm crazy or some of you get it. I've heard people say that kind of thing before too, so I'm one of those people. But the minute I got out of bed, I noticed a lot of items were just scattered all over the floor in the room. I walked out into the hallway, and I don't remember who it was because at that point in time, we just had a party. I fell asleep, and everybody else stayed up. But somebody was laying on the floor, just not moving. I found out later he was not deceased, so there was a little bit of light to that. But the minute I exited the room, there was just a body there, so you can imagine what's going through my young mind, right? So I remember just kicking him, just running into him as my door opened. And so, I don't know how I gathered the courage to do it, but I went around him, hung a right towards my living room at the time in my apartment that I lived in with my family. More items scattered everywhere. I think I kicked the bottle, or at least what remained of a bottle. I remember I actually did cut my foot. As I made it to the living room, I heard my father snoring, but he wasn't in his usual place when he would drink and fall asleep, usually by the chair in by the balcony. He wasn't there. He was actually on the floor, just laying there. And then I remember making my way to the kitchen to where I was originally gonna go and get a drink. And that's when I saw it. Just a big pool of red, just scattered all over the floor, just multiple places of splatters here and there. And of course, put two and two together as a kid, even you would know, hey, that simply ain't right. I rushed back to bed and prayed to God that it was just a nightmare. Woke up the next day. Didn't even get my water, so I was super dehydrated. Woke up, my mom was there in the living room. Everything was moderately back to normal. Like, it wasn't fully as where things would be, but somebody put in a considerable amount of effort to hide what happened that night. So, you ever get up and you get that really cold feeling in the pit of your stomach? Maybe, just maybe, you might regret what you see when you get out there. After all, just because you're home doesn't mean you're actually safe. It's just too bad that I had to learn that when I was like 9.
What's up, YouTube? Mini Minchino here, and thanks for watching this video. I'm sorry if it turned out to be a little bit too long for your liking, but I wanted to put together this fun little experiment just pretty much because. And also Halloween. Please feel free to check out any of my sources down below. You'll find sources to the music and the photos that I used in this video. All royalty free, of course. And yeah, thanks to everybody who submitted, for submitting. I'm sorry if your stories didn't end up in here, but yeah, sometimes that's how these things go. Also, thanks to Candido, aka DJ Magic, for doing a lot of the narration for me. That made things, that just made things amazing. It just made it a whole lot easier. So thank you so much for that. But yeah, you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. Happy Halloween, and enjoy the nightmares.